guys, good evening. I'm rocking the skeleton onesie today. It's that kind of night. I feel like it's gonna be too hot soon to rock the onesie, so we're getting one last use out of it before before winter's fully over. I think compared to probably where most people are, it's already probably considered winter being over here. It's a little awkward today. I have the baby sitting right in front of me on the desk, so I'm working around him here. Let me show him off for just a second here. He's laying right here in front of me. So it's a little hard to work around him, but we're just reading today, so he's welcome to chill. You guys are welcome to chill. Thank you for being here tonight. Cakes, Connor, you guys are wonderful human beings. Thanks for stopping in. So we are picking up tonight reading A Daughter of the Samurai, which we started actually last month, but life happened quite a lot since then. So it's been several weeks since we read the first part of this. Um, if if you want to have a recap before listening to this part, the first part is on YouTube, so you can catch up over there. Um, but as always, when we're doing reading streams, you can always type exclamation mark new word. You can see words that we've learned along the way while we've read previous books. And as always, we will find any words that we don't already know, and we'll add them to the list today. So far, we haven't gotten that far, and we're about, you can see, about yay far into the book. So far, just talking about Etsuko's background, her childhood, being raised as, an upper-class rural Japanese girl, going through her tutorage, etc., and just sort of what daily life is like between her training and the servants that serve her household, that kind of thing. At the very end of the last part, her brother came back from America. Her brother was previously disowned by their father, and he had gone to America and joined the army, and he has now come home because her father's died, and he's now able to return home, which is pretty crazy. So that's where we're picking up from. Let me know if the background music is too loud or overbearing. Hopefully, I think it should be at a good level, but since it's sort of a playlist, it might vary up and down. Let me know if it needs to be adjusted. Happy to do so. Other thing to know about this book before we continue, just in case you weren't here last time, is this book is like, it's a public domain book, So, which first of all, that means I'm allowed to read it on Twitch, because you're typically not allowed to read books on Twitch, which kind of sucks, because I love to read out loud to people. But I got this one off of Amazon, not knowing that it was like a book that somebody had reprinted from the original. We found some errors in it last time, so there was like a whole page that was like printed twice, that kind of thing. So we might find some other funny instances of stuff like that happening. But we'll see. Hopefully nothing too disruptive, because we're trying to read a story here. We don't want to have disruptions. That'd be really annoying. But if you guys are ready, if you have your tea, you got your hot chocolate, your tea, your coffee, whatever you're snuggling up with tonight. If you're all ready, I have my peppermint tea. I got some honey in it. I'm ready to get started. And the baby boy is laying right here, so extra cozy tonight. Isn't that right, baby boy? My goodness, he's so cute. All right. I won't delay us any further. We're on chapter 8. Title is Two Ventures, not adventures, just Two Ventures. My brother's coming introduced an entirely new and exciting element into our home. This was the letters which he occasionally received from friends in America. The letters were dull, for they told of nothing but people and business, so after the first few I lost all interest in them. But the big, odd-shaped envelopes and the short packages of thick paper covered with faint pen writing held a wonderful fascination. None of us had ever seen a pen or any kind of writing paper except our rolls of thin paper with the narrow envelopes. We could write a letter of any length, sometimes several feet on that paper. We began at the right side and, using a brush, wrote in vertical lines, unrolling from the left as we wrote. The graceful black characters standing out against a background all white but shaded by the varying thickness of the paper into a mass of delicate, misty blossoms was very artistic. In later years, we had flowered paper in colors, but when I was a child, only white was considered dignified. Brother always used the large, odd-shaped envelopes for letters to America, so I suppose that kind was necessary. One day, he asked me to hand to the postman a letter enclosed in one of our narrow envelopes, embossed with a graceful branch of maple leaves. I was greatly surprised when I saw that it had an expensive stamp on the corner and was addressed to America. Honorable brother, I hesitatingly asked, will government allow this letter to go? Why not? I thought only big envelopes could be used for letters to America. Nonsense, he said crossly, and then he added in a kind tone, I haven't any more, and those I sent to Tokyo haven't come. And so the delicate maple leaves went to America, and my girlish heart was pleased. It was the first pleasant bond between the two countries of which I had known. There was nothing definite in my mind against America, but I was so constantly hearing allusions to the disagreeable expressions of almost all persons who had dealings with foreigners that I had a vague feeling of distaste for the unknown land. This impression was strengthened by odd stories told by servants of red-faced, light-haired barbarians who had no heels and to prop up their shoes with artificial blocks. That's interesting. Had no heels and had to prop up their shoes with artificial blocks? I can't really imagine what that's referring to. Oh, is it just like high-heeled shoes? Is that what they're talking about? I mean, nobody has built-in high heels, right? I don't think they have those in Japan. I spent some time there, and I gotta say, they have feet just like the rest of us. It was said that animals were eaten whole by these strange people, and that the master of a lordly house often entertained his guests by cutting up a cooked eagle in their presence. It was also rumored that the cheap red blankets extensively imported at the time were dyed with the blood of stolen infants. One report, which was widespread in city and country alike, was that the peculiar animal odor of foreigners was caused by the eating of flesh. This probably originated from the unfamiliar odor of wool noticed in the damp clothing of foreign sailors. Since we had neither sheep nor woolen cloth in Japan, the unfamiliar odor was naturally associated with the person who carried the scent about with him. The name has clung, and even yet it is not uncommon for country people inquiring in a store for woolen cloth to ask for animal-smelling goods. Yes, because Japanese people are used to being able to lay their feet flat on the ground, even when crouching. It's less common around here. But they don't have a built-in heel on their foot. I know what you mean, though. Brother denied very few of these tales. I think many of them he believed, even after having lived in America. Apparently, he had met while there were very few people except those engaged in buying and selling. Once, grandmother said, with a sigh, your honorable brother seems to have learned only the ways of tradesmen in faraway America. But, she added thoughtfully, perhaps it is a land where only the tradesmen live. I got my headphones on, getting my cheeks beat in comp, but I'm here for the good readings. Well, you know what, Dawn? Maybe hearing a calm story will help you be really chill in the heat of battle. If you're still on later, I might come join you. I want to play some Overwatch perhaps later on tonight. But I'm probably going to be doing this for at least, an hour and a half or so. But good luck in your games. If you haven't placed already, let me know how those are going for you. Okay. He had been to America, but we did not realize that he had seen only one small portion of one coast city in that great land. As time passed on, Brother seemed to withdraw from our family life, and yet he did not fall into the life of the people of Nagaoka. He was different from everybody. Sometimes he looked troubled and anxious, but more often he was only restless and dissatisfied. At such times, he frequently came and sat beside me as I sewed or studied, and I think he talked more freely to me than to anybody else. Occasionally, though not often, he spoke of himself, and gradually I learned much of what his daily life had been since he left home. His going to America was due to the craze for foreign business which had struck Tokyo so forcefully around the time Brother left the army. Many young men, confident of rapid and brilliant success, were launching out in various directions, and someone induced Brother to invest all he had in what was represented to be a larger export company having offices in America. He was offered a partnership if he could take charge of the business there. Like most men of his rank, he had no realization of his own ignorance of business methods, so he accepted and set sail for America. On reaching his destination, he found that he had been defrauded. The export company was only a small toy shop situated in a crowded Japanese district, and kept by the wife of a workman who knew nothing of the promised partnership. Astonished and disappointed, Brother made his way to a nearby hotel. A pretty poor place, he said, where many Japanese men were talking and playing games. They were mostly workmen or cheap clerks of a humble class, with almost no education. But they were most respectful to him, and though the surroundings were uncongenial, he knew no other place to go. In a short time, he had spent all his money, and knowing nothing of any kind of work and almost nothing of the English language, he easily drifted downward into the life of those around him. Some men would have pushed up through the mud and found light, but my brother knew little of foreigners and had no ambitions regarding them, and what he saw of them where he was only repelled him. Sometimes he left the crowded district where he lived and strolled through wide streets where there were tall buildings and big stores. There he saw foreign people, but they either paid no attention to him or looked at him as he himself would look at a coolie at home. This amused him, for to him, the strange-looking men who hurried by him talking in loud voices and smoking large, ill-smelling tobacco rolls or chewing horrible stuff that they blew out of their mouths onto the street were wholly disgusting. The women were queerly dressed creatures who stared and laughed with their mouths open. Nothing seemed delicate or refined, only big and strong and coarse. Everything repelled his artistic soul, so he drifted back to his uncongenial but understandable surroundings. Oh, the baby's given a big stretch down here. Yes, what a cutie. I tried to put the camera so that you could see both me and Cassidy at the same time, but I couldn't really find a good way to set it up. We might have to do a 2-camera. Next time we'll put 2 cameras. We'll have one cat cam and one for me. Then fate stepped in. My brother was hurt by an accidental blow on the head, which sent him to the hospital for 3 blessed, cool, clean weeks. The day he was dismissed and sick at heart was slowly walking toward the only place he knew to go, his old quarters. He turned a corner and suddenly came face to face with a young man, vigorous and brisk, walking with a quick step. The man laughed aloud as both abruptly came to a standstill. Then, seeing how pale and ill brother looked, he turned and walked with him. However shabbily my brother might be dressed, he always had the bearing of a gentleman, and recognizing this, the young man, whose name was Matsuo, insisted on taking brother to his own room. A few days later, he found a place for him in a store where he himself was foreman, and the acquaintance thus ripened into a warm and lasting friendship. Had this help been given when brother first reached America, the high-bred, delicately reared youth, although overindulged and unwisely trained for practical life, might have won his puzzling way through all the strangeness. But it was now too late. That accidental blow on the head caused a damage which, though not apparent at first, gradually developed into a trouble that unfitted him for steady work, and my poor brother was never the same again. But Matsuo was steadfastly kind. Then came a message from Major Sato in Tokyo saying father was ill and wanted his son to return home. Of what was in my brother's heart then I know nothing, but for many weeks he delayed his reply. Then he came. That autumn our year of mourning was over, and brother, being home to take the place of father, sister's marriage was planned for harvest time. The season, however, was early. Rice patches throughout Etsuko were bowing with rich promise early in October, but of course nobody was ever married in the No-God month. The No-God month? It's some of the words, so I mentioned that this book is like badly printed from a reseller on Amazon, and there's a bunch of words that are like smashed together, like they forgot to put a space in, or there's words that should be spaced together, they've spaced them apart. Like, I don't know who typed this, but they should probably work on their typing a little bit. But I don't know if the No-God month is a thing. N-O-G-O-D, just mashed together, the No-God month. So the first good luck day in November was chosen. It is during October that the marriage gods all meet in Itsumo Temple to join the names of those who are to wed. One of the favorite stories for grandmothers and nurses to tell little girls is about a youth of olden time who was so unfortunate as to have no parents or elder brother. There being no one to arrange a marriage for him, he grew to the age of 20 and was still a bachelor. One October day, he decided to visit Itsumo Temple to see if his name was coupled with that of any maiden. So, taking with him as a gift the first rice sheaf of his harvest, he started on his long day's journey. As he approached the temple steps, he heard voices. Names were being called like counting. He, she. He, she. He recognized the name of a young man he knew, then another and another, each paired off with the name of a young woman. Ma, ma, whispered the astonished youth. I have intruded upon a meeting of the gods. But his interest was too great to allow him to retreat. Creeping between the ornamental posts that supported the floor, he listened guiltily but with anxious hope. Another two names. Another. He, she. He, she. But alas, not his own. Finally, a voice of authority announced, These are planned. Our last day is almost gone and our work for the year is ended. Wait a moment, said another voice. There is Taro. Again he is left. Cannot we find a maiden for him? The youth's heart gave a bound, for he was Taro. Oh, troublesome, impatiently cried a god. Again comes that name. We need not haste. He has no one to range for him, said another. His name must go uncoupled for another year, came from a distant corner. There is no maiden left. Wait, spoke the first voice. In Chestnut Village, a girl has just been born in the house of the village master. The family is of higher class, but let us give her to Taro, then our work will be done. Yes, yes, cried all the gods. Put the names together and we will hasten to the duties of our own shrines. Our work for the year is ended, spoke the voice of authority. The youth crept away, excited and indignant and sorely disappointed. As he trudged slowly along the road on his homeward way, both disappointed and indignation grew. But when he came to the site of Chestnut Village and saw the comfortable house and the village master with its thick thatch and large screen heavy with dying sheafs of rice, his anger lessened and he thought, after all, it is not so bad. He walked slowly by the open door. A child's bed of cushions was just within. He saw a baby's face and a tiny close-shut hand. Close-shut hand? 12 years at least to wait, he suddenly cried. 12 years only. Ooh. I will not have it so. I will defy the gods. On the tokonoma was a sword rest holding the single sword of a humble vassal. Grasping it, he made a quick thrust through the cushions, and bounding through the door, he hurried on his way. Years passed. Fate was kind, and Taro prospered, but no bride could he find. More years passed. At last, patiently accepting bachelorhood as a punishment for his defiance of the gods, he became resigned. Then a surprising thing happened. A go-between called with the offer of a bride. Beautiful, industrious, dutiful. Taro was delighted. Negotiations were carried through. The bride came, the marriage took place, and the young wife proved all that the happy Taro could wish. One warm day, when she was sewing on the porch, she loosened her collar folds and Taro saw an odd curving scar on her neck. What is it? He asked. That is a strange mystery, said the bride, smiling. When I was only a babe, my grandmother heard me cry, and coming, found my father's sword on the floor, and I with this curving cut across my neck and shoulder. No one was near, and it was never learned how it happened. My grandmother said that I was marked by the gods for some wise purpose. And so it must be, concluded the wife as she leaned again over her sewing. Taro walked thoughtfully away. Again he saw the baby face and the tiny close-shut hand, and he realized how hopeless it is to try to thwart the decree of the gods. When Ishii told us this story, she always closed with, and so you see it is useless not to accept gratefully the will of the gods. What is planned must be obeyed. Time for a little sip. Sip of the old mint. I waited just the perfect amount of time to take my first sip. Sometimes I get really impatient with my tea and I'm like, yeah, I gotta take a sip even though it's still boiling. But I waited just long enough. Perfect tea temperature. I have nowhere left to put my hands because Cassidy moved over and and is now where I was resting my hands, so it's okay, he's just a baby. Thinking of making myself a yogurt bowl? What will you put in your yogurt bowl? Please send a picture in Discord. I would love to see your yogurt bowl. Please go make one also. You need to eat. You need to eat some yummy yogurt, some yummy fruit. What do you put? Fruit, granola, some honey, perhaps. And the tea is the right temp for reading. It's the right temp for tea. Period. You know, tea is not just a reading beverage. Tea is an at all times beverage. At least it is for me. Apple and almond and cereal. Well, that sounds very delicious and very much like a fall harvest. Almond, not so good for me. Allergic to nuts, but hopefully delicious for you. I actually have no idea what an almond tastes like, but I associate like apple and almonds with autumn, so I feel like that's right. When the day of Sister's wedding came, we were all greatly excited, but the real excitement of a Japanese marriage is at the house of the bridegroom, as it is there that the wedding takes place. However, the ceremony of leaving home is always elaborate, and for several days our entire house was filled with the sound of people ordering and people obeying. Then came a day when Taki, Ishi, and Toshi were busy for hours, all three folding bedding and packing bridal chests. And the next day, the procession of bridal belongings went swinging out of the gateway and on over the mountain to Sister's home to be, which is all smashed into one word. It looks like home tobe. Need good tea suggestions. I've only really ever had like green and chai mostly. Oh, Dawn. Oh, Dawn. You've come to the right place. I'll share some good tea recipes. Lately, I made my very first London fog latte, which you might have the ingredients for in your own kitchen. I highly recommend making one as soon as possible. If you have well, maybe, I don't know, Earl Grey tea is kind of not that common. Most people don't like it, but if you like Earl Grey tea, a little bit of cream, honey, and vanilla. Ooh, it's so good. It's so freaking good. Other than that, I like to drink like matcha. I like pretty much every tea. I like the brand Yogi tea just for like regular tea bags. They have a lot of really good flavors. They have a green blueberry tea, which is stupendous. They also have a tangerine tea and a hibiscus tea, both very, 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 very yummy. There's also I have a recipe for like actual hibiscus tea from my Overwatch cookbook. Actually, it's one of Arisa's recipes, and it's you make it on the stove top with like orange peels and hibiscus flowers and stuff. Wow. How could you have forgotten that I'm allergic to nuts, Connor? I mean, honestly, it's not like you're there eating with me all the time and you would know something like that. It's okay, you don't need to remember such little things. Member's Choice Herbal Infusion Earl Grey, but if you like your tea mild, use white one with honey and soft flavors, but if you like strong tea, have black Earl Grey, wonderful with milk. Same with matcha latte. Yes, I agree. Howdy, Fizz. How are you doing this evening? Do you have your honk chocolate ready? Because we're reading. We're reading the night away. And you gotta have a cozy beverage. I have a cozy cat sitting right in front of me. And now we're talking about tea recipes. I know you're not very fond of tea, but Don apparently doesn't know anything about tea, so if you have a good tea recipe, share it with him. My stomach is too full of spaghetti. My stomach is full of vegetable patties. I had vegetable patties for dinner. That's it. What if one day I make you a B-Day cake and I put nuts in it? Well, here's a hot tip. Please don't. I won't be able to eat it. I'm a coffee boy. I don't know nothing about tea because brain bad. You can be a coffee boy and a tea boy. I'm very much both. I drink coffee in the morning and tea the rest of the day. My stomach empty. Get yourself your yogurt bowl. What on earth are you waiting for, Connor? I'm a coffee boy because tea is like Skittle water but with leaves. That's because you're not drinking good tea. I know you don't like to try new things, but you're not drinking strong enough tea. My tea, strong. Too strong, some might say. I'm gonna give you guys a sneak peek of the boy while we're on a break here. Oh my goodness, he just has to lay here on the desk like it's a table. The boy, oh, it's not facing me anymore. Chill, camera. Okay. I've never made you like a tea recipe though. I just make you a little tea bag. He and Emily need good tea to be coffee and tea boys. I'll make you a London fog latte, and you'll say, this is too strong, I don't like it. Make me a London fog, bruv. I don't know, you won't even try your brother's, and he offers it to you all the time, so I feel like I'll just make it for you, and then you'll throw it in the garbage, and then I'll say, what a waste of my delicious London fog tea. It's British! Is it, though? I wonder where London fogs were made. I'm gonna try to Google it over Cassidy's limp body here. London fog latte. What is London fog latte? Origin. It is rumored to have been first made in Vancouver, British Columbia. So don't worry, it's not British, it's Canadian. Texas. Internet says Canada. So I don't know who's right, I couldn't say. I'll take 10. Well, I'll make you 10. Actually, I have no Earl Grey right now, so you're gonna have to wait. But it's probably gonna take a while to get it, through the mail to you anyway, especially 10 of them, so I think we have some time. Alright, I'm gonna get back on track about Sister's wedding. 2 days later, Sister went away. The hairdresser came very early that morning, for the bride's hair had to be arranged in the elaborate married style with wonderful ornaments of tortoiseshell and coral. Then her face and neck were covered with thick white powder, and she was dressed in a robe and sash of white, the death color, because marriage means the bride's death to her father's family. Beneath this was a garment of scarlet, the dress of a newborn babe, typical of her birth into her husband's family. Mother had on her beautiful crest dress, and brother looked like father in the ceremonious pleated linen skirt and stiff shoulder piece of the kamishimo. I was so glad to see him look like father. Just as the bride palanquin was brought to the door, we all went to the shrine for Sister to say farewell to the spirit of our ancestors, for after marriage she would belong no longer to our family but to her husband's. She bowed alone before the shrine. Then Mother slipped over the mat to her side and presented her with a beautiful mirror case, the kind that all Japanese ladies wear with ceremonial dress. Sister's was beautiful mosaic work of crepe and a pattern of pine, bamboo, and plum. It had been made by our great-grandmother's own hands. Inside it was a small mirror. A brocade-covered crystal hung from it on a silk cord, and on the edge of the case, slipped under the band, was a long silver hairpin. In olden days, this was a dagger. These are emblematic of a mirror, the jewel and the sword of the imperial regalia. As Mother handed the mirror case to Sister, she said the same words that every mother says to a bride. She told her that now she was to go forth bravely to her new life, just as a soldier goes to battle. Look in the mirror every day, she said, for if scars of selfishness or pride are in the heart, they will grow into the lines of the face. Watch closely. Be strong like the pine, yield in gentle obedience like the swaying bamboo, and yet, like the fragrant plum blossoming beneath the snow, never lose the gentle perseverance of loyal womanhood. I never saw my mother so moved, but poor Sister looked only blank and expressionless beneath the stiff white powder. We all bowed deeply at the door. Sister entered the palanquin, and the next moment was hidden behind the red screen of the little window. Her own nurse, who should have come next, had married and gone far away, so Ishii took her place and entered the first jinriksha. The go-between and his wife were in the next two, and then came brother and mother. The procession started. Toshi sprinkled salt on the doorstep, just as if a corpse had been carried it out, and mingling with the sound of rolling wheels and the soft thud of trotting feet came grandmother's trembly old voice singing the farewell part of the wedding song. From the shore, a boat with lifted sail rides toward the rising moon. On waves of ebbing tide it sails. The shadow of the land falls backward, and the boat sails farther, farther. So ended Sister's life as an Inagaki, for however often she might visit us after this, and however lovingly and informally she might be treated, she would never again be anything but a guest. I've only heard one paragraph of this book, but it reminds me of The Ghost Bride. That was a good book. But you're right, I mean, it is... I see the similarities, but this is real. This is a nonfiction book. This is an autobiography. So, now that I say that, I can't remember how that book ended up going. I feel like I have, like, images of him flashing through my mind. Just flashing through my mind. So there's no dragons. Not yet. I haven't ruled them out. I mean, we have this much of the book to go, so, like, there's room for there to be dragons, but I know that this girl from Japan is going to move to Ohio, so my bet is that there probably will not be dragons, but we won't rule it out yet. Long afterward, Sister told me of her trip to her new home. It was only a few hours long, but she had to go over a mountain, and the palanquin jolted fearfully. She said her greatest anxiety was to keep her head, laden with the heavy shell bars, from bumping against the cushions and disarranging her elaborately dressed hair. Finally, the carriers were trotting along evenly on a smooth road, and then they came to a stop, and Ishi pushed up the reed screen of the window. "Young mistress," she said, "we have reached the halting place where we are to rest before presenting ourselves to the house of the honorable bridegroom." Mother and Ishi helped Sister out, and they all went to a good-sized but simple farmhouse. They were received most graciously by the hostess, who was a distant relative of the bridegroom's family. There they had dinner, each person being served with red rice and a small fish, head and all, meaning congratulation. Ishi freshened up Sister's dress, looked over her sash, examined her hair, and retouched her powdered face. Then the procession moved slowly on up a long, sloping hill. At the top, they were met by the 7.5 times, all smashed into one word, 7.5 times, courier, and soon reached the big gateway with its crest banner and lanterns of welcome. She was conscious of being on a stone path when the carriers placed the palanquin to the ground. She could see nothing, but she knew in that moment the little window in the front would be opened and the bridegroom's face would appear. Then he would strike the top of the palanquin with his fan, which would mean welcome. There was usually no delay, but this bridegroom was a bashful youth, only 17, and they had to go for him. Sister said that in those few minutes of waiting, she, for the first time, was frightened. Then she heard swift footsteps, and the next moment, the little reed screen was jerked open. She ought to have sat quietly with her eyes cast modestly down, but she was startled and gave one quick upward glance. In that instant's time, she saw a pale, pockmarked face with a broad, low brow and close-pressed lips. Down went the screen, and, without a second's pause, clap, clap, came a nervous slap of the fan above her head. The palanquin was lifted and carried to the door. Sister, within, sat strangely calm, for in that instant of lifted screen, her fright had slipped away, forever. The door was reached. The palanquin was lowered to the ground. Sister was helped out, and she was entered into her new life home. Two old voices completed the wedding song with the words of welcome. On the sea, a boat with lifted sail rides toward the rising moon. On the waves of the flowing tide it comes. The shadow of the past lies far behind, and the boat sails nearer, nearer, to the shores called Happy Life. Chapter 9, The Story of a Marionette. On the first day of Urobon, when I was 12 years old, Ishi bought a new ornament for my hair and placed it just in front of my big stand-up bow knot. It was a silver shield set in a mass of small, loose silver flowers and looked very beautiful against the shiny black background. "It was sent to you by Honorable Yedo grandmother," she said. "She had it made from melted ancient coins, and it is very wonderful." I turned my face in the direction of Tokyo and bowed a silent thank you to the kind, invisible donor. Just who Honorable Yedo grandmother was, I did not know. Each year, ever since I could remember, I had received a beautiful gift from her for our midsummer festival of Urobon, and in a vague way, I was conscious that our family had some close connection with her, but I gave it no thought. All little girls had grandmothers. Some had two, and some still more. Of course, grandmothers on the mother's side lived elsewhere, but it was not unusual for a father to have both his mother and grandmother living in his home. Old people were always welcome, their presence giving dignity to the family. The house of a son who had the care of 3 generations of parents was called the honored seat of the aged. Urobon, a welcome to souls returned, was our festival to celebrate the annual visit of Oshorai-sama, a term used to represent the combined spirits of all our ancestors. It was the most dearly beloved of our festivals, for we believed that our ancestors never lost their loving interest in us, and this yearly visit kept fresh in all our hearts a cheerful and affectionate nearness to the dear ones gone. Jack's listening. Well, I hope Jack is comforted. Did you make him some tea at least? I know you don't want to drink any Skittle water, but I'm sure Jack wants some. In preparing for the arrival of Oshorai-sama, the only standards were cleanliness and simplicity. Everything being done in an oddly primitive fashion, not elaborated even in the slightest degree from Bon festivals of the most ancient time. He has a honk chocolate. I don't know if honk chocolate is okay for kittens. For several days, everyone had been busy. Gia and another man had trimmed the trees and hedges, had swept all the ground, even under the house, and had carefully washed off the stepping stones in the garden. The floor mats were taken out and whipped dustless with bamboo switches. Kin and Toshi, in the meantime, making the air resound with the pata 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 of paper dusters around the shoji and the long drawn-out si-wee-shi of steaming hot padded cloths pushed up and down the polished porch floors. All the woodwork in the house, the broad ceiling boards, the hundreds of tiny white bars crossing the paper doors, the carved ventilators, and the mirror-like post and platform of the tokonomas was wiped off with hot water. Then every little broken place in the rice paper shoji was mended. And finally, the entire house, from thatch to the underfloor icebox, was as fresh and clean as rainwater falling from the sky. Jack never made me Skittle water or hunk chocolate. He already mailed one to you. Yeah, you have to wait for the mail done. We've been over this. Your soggy envelope is on the way. It's going to take 7 to 10 business days, okay? It might be dry even by then, so the envelope might be nice and crisp, and then inside you'll just dump the envelope into your mouth and it'll be great. Okay, back to your rank. Good luck out there. Mother brought from the go down a rare old kakemono, one of father's treasures, and after it was hung, Kin placed beneath our handsomest bronze vase holding a big loose bunch of the 7 grasses of autumn. Althea, Pampas, Convolvulus, wild pink, and 3 kinds of asters, purple, yellow, and white. What are these words? The 7 grasses of autumn, I guess. I know that I should technically do a new word on those, but I think they're just types of the grasses of autumn. But, you know, just a reminder that you can do this anytime and get a new word. I just said go down, so good thing we got a reminder just now. These are mostly flowers, but Japanese designates all plants that grow from the ground in slender blade-like leaves as grasses. The shrine was, of course, the most important of all, as it was there the spirit guests lived during the days of the visit. Gia had gone to the pond before dawn to get lotus blossoms, for it is only with the first rays of sunshine that the puff comes, which opens the pale green buds into the snowy beauty. Before he returned, the shrine had been emptied and cleaned, and the bronze Buddha reverently dusted and returned to his place in the gilded lotus. The tablet holding the ancestors' names and father's picture, which Mother always kept in the shrine, were wiped off carefully, the brass openwork, everlasting light, lantern filled afresh with rapeseed oil, the incense burner, the candle stands, the sacred books, and our rosaries all arranged in place, and the ugly fish-mouth wooden drum, which is typically of woman's submissive position, rubbed until the worn place on the red lacquer was a shiny brown. Then Gia covered the floor before the shrine with a fresh, rudely woven mat of pampas grass and placed on either side a vase holding bunches of the 7 grasses of autumn. Cassidy's dreaming a little bit. His little paws are twitching around. He's sleeping good listening to a bedtime story. But the most interesting time of all came when Honorable Grandmother and I sat down before the shrine to prepare the decorations of welcome. I always loved to help her do this. Ishii and Toshi brought us some odd-shaped vegetables they had found in the garden, a handful of dried hemp stems from which the bark had been removed, and yards of somen, a sort of soft, pliable macaroni. I don't know what I expected, not the word macaroni. A sort of soft, pliable macaroni. Oh, Connor, I'm so glad that you got your yogurt bowl. Send a picture of it. I want to see. I want to see how fancy your yogurt bowl is. Honorable Grandmother took a crooked-necked cucumber, one end of which was shaped something like a lifted head, and made it into a horse, using corn silk for a mane and tail and hemp stems for stiff little legs. Of a small, plump eggplant, she made a water buffalo with horns and legs of hemp stems, and twisting some half-dried soman into harness for both little animals, she planted them in the shrine. I made several horses and buffaloes too. While we were working, Gia came in and with some small lotus leaves, the edges of which were beginning to dry and turn up like curved dishes, and a few very small yellow and red balls, a new kind of fruit which I now know were tomatoes. After Ishi had filled the lotus leaf dishes with vegetables and every kind of fruit except the furry peach, Honorable Grandmother looped the soman across the top of the shrine in a series of graceful festoons, hanging on it at intervals small purple eggplants and the tiny yellow and red tomatoes. Then Ishi brought the kitchen row of steps, all smashed together and put in quotation marks, and climbing up hung the white bond lantern high above everything. It was only a white paper cube, twisted about with a braid of paper having loose ends, but when it was lighted, the heat made it constantly whirl, and the many ends of paper rising, falling, and waving looked like a flock of tiny, fluttering birds. It was very beautiful. The meaning of the decorations and the queer little vegetable animals had been lost in the midst of past years, but the lotus leaf shape of the dishes was because the lotus is a sacred flower. The Buddhist Bible tells the story of Buddha's time of temptation when he was living as a hermit in the mountain of snow. The Buddhist Bible? I don't think that's what it's called. She just called it a Bible so that like people would know what she was talking about, but it's kind of funny to call it the Buddhist Bible. One day at the hour of dawn, he was sitting in meditation when he heard a strange, sweet song. As he listened, wonder and joy crept into his heart, for in the notes of the melody was slowly unfolding the plan of salvation. Suddenly it ceased. In vain he waited. All was silence. Hurrying to the edge of a precipice, he peered into the mists of the valley, and there saw a horrible demon who turned a taunting face toward the disappointed and anxious prophet. Earnestly, the Buddha begged for the remainder of the song, but the demon said that he could sing no more until his hunger was satisfied with human flesh, and his thirst with human blood. Then would he sing the mystic plan until the knowledge of salvation had reached all humankind. The Buddha's dearest vision, that he himself should bring the message to the world, faded into nothingness, and eagerly he cried, "Satisfy thy hunger with my flesh, and quench thy thirst with my blood, but continue thy song until every soul is saved." And casting off his robe, he sprang from the rock. A sudden gleam of sunshine lighted the valley and touched the waters of the pool where it was floating a lotus with spreading leaves and one unopened bud. As the holy prophet fell through the air, the bud burst suddenly into bloom, and on its snowy petals softly sank the one who was to give to more than 1/3 of the world a faith far better than any they had known. The raised center of the lotus even now is called utena, which means seat, and lotus blossoms, either natural or artificial, are always before every Buddhist shrine. Just before sunset, we were all ready for twilight, was the hour of welcome. Oshorai-sama was always spoken of as a vague, impersonal figure who came riding on a snow-white steed from the land of darkness, the shores of the unknown, the place of the dead. Like all children, I had always looked forward with pleasure to the visit of the ancestors, but after Father's death, I felt a deep personal interest, and my heart was beating with excitement as the family met at the shrine. Each one, even the servants, wore a new dress, simple and inexpensive but new. As twilight deepened, the shrine lantern was lighted, the shoji pushed back, and the entrance doors opened, thus leaving a free path from the outside road all the way to the shrine. Then we started walking 2 by 2 through the open door, across the hall, down the step of the shoe-off place, and along the stone walk to the big entrance gates, which were open wide. In the center of the gateway, Gia had crisscrossed a little pile of hemp stems, just 13, round a tiny heap of fluffy, dried grass. When we reached this, we parted, Gia and Yoshita going on one side of the path, and on the other, honorable grandmother, mother, myself, and Ishi, Kin, and Toshi. Then, all respectfully stooping, we bowed our heads and waited. Brother was in Tokyo, so honorable grandmother, with Ishi's help, struck the fire of purity with flint and steel, and the dropping spark lighted the hemp stems into a blaze of welcome. Do you ever put honey in the bottom of your tea and then it all sinks to the bottom because you didn't stir it because you didn't want to make a spoon dirty, and then you get to the bottom of your honey and it's just really, really sweet and delicious? But then you kind of felt like, man, I could have had all this honey stirred throughout my tea if only I had gotten a spoon. Because that's what's happening to me right now. Honey water. All the town was silent and dusky except for hundreds of tiny fires, for one was blazing at every gateway. As I bowed, my longing heart seemed to pull my father to me. Through the distance I could hear the sound of soft, galloping feet, and I knew the snow-white steed was nearing. The moment's blaze of the hemp stem fire was dying. A faint breath of warm August wind struck my cheek, and peace crept into my heart. Slowly we rose and with bowed heads walked back, on the outside edges of the path, 2 by 2, but wide apart, leaving the sacred space of the walk between. When we reached the shrine, Mother struck the gong and we all bowed with the dignified cheerfulness of our usual greeting to a welcome guest. We seemed so few since even the year before, and how cordially our hearts welcomed the presence which we knew would bring into our home cheerful companionship for the happy and helpful comfort for the sorrowful, sorry. Connor, I'm glad that you can relate to my struggles of tea honey. The dregs of honey water sure are delicious, though. The next 2 days, the town was full of lanterns. Everybody carried one, every house was decorated with them, every street was lined with them, and at night the cemeteries were filled with glowworm lights, for every grave had above it a tiny white lantern swinging from an arch made from stems of pampas grass. It was a happy time for all Japan, and the one day in the year when no life was taken of fish, fowl, or even insect. The fishermen idly wandered about, arrayed in holiday garments. The chickens cackled and crowed in their bamboo cages, and the little crickets, which children loved to keep in tiny cages, sang their shrill song in the trees without the approach of a single sticky-topped pole. Children really kept crickets in cages? I thought that was just like something in Mulan. Like that she had a cricket in a cage. That seems like you would need an extremely tiny cage to put a cricket inside. Like, crickets are small. Crickets are not like large enough to put in any kind of cage. I can't even imagine a cage that would hold one cricket, one regularly sized cricket. And charity extended loving arms to the farthest limit. No priest passed with an empty begging bowl. Pampas-woven baskets of food were hidden beneath lotus leaves on the graves, waiting for the poor to carry away when the bond lights had burned out. And even the sinners in hell, if their hearts longed for salvation, were given another chance during the merciful days of Bon. Our home was filled with an atmosphere of pleasant thoughts, unselfish acts, and happy laughter, for we felt that our... So sorry about that. It kicked my cord of my... my camera cord's hanging under my desk, and it's in the way of my foot. It's in the way of my foot. Ahem. Our home was filled with an atmosphere of pleasant thoughts, unselfish acts, and happy laughter, for we felt that our kind guests enjoyed our simple pleasures of new clothes, company courtesies, and our daily feasts with them, with the shrine food consisting of fruits, vegetables, and rice dumplings. Honorable grandmother's face grew more peaceful each hour. Mother's beamed with calm content. The servants were chattering and smiling all the time, and my heart was full of quiet joy. In the shadows before sunrise on the 4th day, Gio went for lotus blossoms, and Mother placed fresh food before the shrine. When the brightening air outside began to quarrel with the soft white lantern inside, we gathered for the farewell. The past days had been happy ones, and I think we all felt sad when, after the last deep bows, Mother rose and lifted the pampas mat from before the shrine. She doubled and flattened it, then tied the ends with grass, thus forming a rude little canoe, and fixed a hemp stem arch in the center. The lotus leaf dishes of food were placed within, and some balls of rice and uncooked dough added, as Oshorai-sama's gift to the birds. Then the little vegetable animals and all the decorations of the shrine were put in. The white, fluttering lantern was swung from the arch, and Jia, carrying a little canoe, Mother and I, followed by Ishi and Toshi, went to the river. Morning was just dawning, but the streets were full of people and the air crowded with circling birds who seemed to know that a treat was before them. When we reached the bank, all except Gia took their places on the bridge and watched him make his way down the slippery steps cut in the bank and joined the throng below. Each person was holding a little canoe with its burden of food and tiny swinging lantern. Look, whispered Ishi as Gia lifted his hands to strike the flint and steel to light our little lantern. Our honorable ancestors will embark on the first tide, warmed by the sunrise. The silence was unbroken except for the loud cries of the birds. Then a sudden ray of sunlight shot across the distant mountain, and hundreds of figures stooped and launched the little canoes. All stood watching as they whirled and drifted along the midst of the storm of darting birds screaming their thanks. One upset. My Oshorai-sama has stepped off and is now in the unknown land, said an old lady, and waiting no longer, she climbed the bank and contentedly made her way home. As daylight brightened, we could see the little boats far in the distance rising and falling, the tiny white lanterns swinging back and forth. We waited until the sun broke into brilliance, then, as the light came racing into the mountainsides, a soft, deep murmur rose from the bowing figures all along the shores. Farewell, O Shodai-sama, we all gently called. Come again next year, we will be waiting to welcome you. The crowd scattered and with satisfied faces made their way homeward. Mother and I walked happily along with Ishi, Toshi, and Jia, chatting pleasantly behind us. The anxious look that Mother's face had lost during the last few days did not come back, and I felt that Father had really been with us, bringing comfort and help to us all. And now he had gone, leaving behind him not loneliness, but peace. That afternoon, as Ishi was putting away my flower hair ornament, she pointed to the shield of polished silver set in the midst of the flowers. A crest was carved deeply in it, and the cut edges sparkled like jewels. It is not the Inagaki crest, I said. No, it is the birth crest of Honorable Yedo grandmother, she said, closing the little box and putting it away. It is very wonderful work. Everything Honorable Yedo grandmother has ever given you is especially beautiful or rare. Honorable Yedo grandmother never sends a gift to my father or to my mother, I said. No, to no one but you, Ishi replied. She always remembers you on the festival to welcome and honor the ancestors of the Inagaki. I remembered long afterward that a faint wonder passed through my mind at the time that I should be the one member of the family who ever received a gift from Honorable Yedo grandmother, but it lasted only a moment. A Japanese child rarely asked what was not told, and there were... Sorry, Cassidy's stretching really cutely in front of me. A Japanese child rarely asked what was not told, and there were so many taken for granted things in Japanese life anyway that I gave the matter no further thought. Not until I was grown did I learn that Honorable Yedo grandmother was my father's own mother, and that my dear Honorable grandmother, to whom I owed so much, was in reality my great-grandmother. When my grandfather died suddenly, leaving father at the age of 7 as his heir, Honorable grandmother became the mistress of her dead son's home and the mother of his child. That the young widow father's mother did not remain in her own home was one of the tragedies of our family system, which, wise as it was when made, has resulted in many wrongs, as must always be the case when the world moves too swiftly and customs slowly lag behind. The Restoration of 1868 was not a sudden event. There had been political agitation for years in which the world of Japan was divided into two factions, those who believed that the imperial power should include both sacred and secular duties, and those who believed the shogun as military ruler should take all national burdens from the shoulders of the sacred emperor. My grandfather believed in the restoration of imperial power, but his wife's father, being a hatamoto, bodyguard of the shogun, was of course a strong advocate of the opposing party. Personally, the two men were friends, but each was strongly loyal to his own principles and to his overlord. Grandfather's death took place very suddenly when he was in Tokyo, then called Yedo, on official duty. Yedo? I'm not sure why they're romanizing it as Yedo, it's Edo. Anyway, it is said that he was taken violently and mysteriously ill just after being elaborately entertained at the mansion of his father-in-law. At the feast were present a number of ardent politicians. That my grandfather understood the political significance of the gathering was shown when, after his death, it was discovered that he had gone to the feast wearing beneath his usual ceremonial dress his white death robe. This is really interesting to hear an autobiographical take of things that happened during the Meiji Restoration. Just because I am really interested in that time period and I've studied the history of it a lot, and I've also consumed a lot of fictional media that takes place during that time. But hearing an autobiographical story, which is somewhere sort of between, the feeling of watching a piece of fiction and also between studying a history book, this is like squarely in the middle, and it's very interesting to hear it talked about casually like this in a book. In those days, when the heart of Japan was beating violently and she was pushing hard against the set, but questioned control of ages, such an event was not so unusual. Nor was my grandfather's quiet acceptance of his fate so rare. It was only samurai loyalty to a cause and samurai bravery in accepting defeat. Standards differ in different countries, but everywhere we are expected to be loyal and to be brave. But the tragedy of it came to the girl wife, my grandmother, who was little more than 20 years old when she became a widow. Under ordinary circumstances, she would have been the honored widow mother of the 7-year-old heir, my father, but because of the well-understood, though outwardly ignored situation, there was but one thing for this proud, deeply humiliated woman to do. Whether she was the sacrifice of her father's ambition or of his loyalty, I do not know, but she humbly abdicated from her husband's family and, changing her name, Inagaki, to the death name, returned to her former home. According to the ideals of that time, this was the most dishonored position that any samurai woman could hold. It was scorned as would be that of a soldier who goes bravely to the battlefield and cowardly returns home before fighting has begun. For a few years, the young widow lived a quiet life in her father's home, devoting her time to classic literature and cultural attainments. Then she was offered an important position as lady official in the mansion of the daimyo of Satsuma. This was just the time when Satsuma was playing a conspicuous part in history. It was this daimyo which single-handed challenged the entire British Eastern Squadron after the young samurai of the clan had killed Mr. Richardson, a British merchant who boldly crossed the ceremonial procession of their overlord. Satsuma was the most powerful daimyo in Japan, and his home, like all high-rank houses during feudal days, was divided into two distinct departments, the state and the home. The government of the home department was entirely under lady officials, and in large mansions with many retainers, these lady officers had to be as efficient as the officials of the state department. Among these able retainers, my grandmother occupied an honored place. That's really cool. Very soon, her special gifts were recognized, and she was chosen as governess to the little girl princess, a position which she held until her charge became a bride-elect and required teachers for wifehood training. Then my grandmother, generously pensioned for life, was honorably released, this farewell being poetically worded. The regretted disappearance of the full moon behind folds of cloud, leaving in her wake soft, wide, spreading shafts of light to remain with us always as gentle and lasting memories. I never saw Honorable Edo grandmother with my human eyes, but I can see her always when I look into my heart. Living in the largest daimyo mansion in Japan, surrounded by wealth and luxury in the midst of daily expressed appreciation of her culture and her natural gifts, and with the respect and affection of her much-loved young princess always with her. Yet her thoughts turned to the little granddaughter whom she never saw. It was not altogether the call of love, though I like to think that that was there also. Her life work, though no fault or neglect of her own, had been taken from her, but her broken duty she held firmly in her heart, and unflinchingly reaching out, as is the samurai way, she, as long as she lived, faithfully sent each year one of her closest personal possessions to the little granddaughter who was said to resemble her, even to her curly hair, to be worn in a welcome greeting to the spirits of the Inagaki family, to whom she could no longer bow, but to whom her duty was due. Her helplessness was tragedy, her efforts were pathos, but to her best and to the last she was true. You kiss my nose, this one? This one right here? I will receive it. Standards of duty differ on opposite sides of the world, but Japanese people never flinch at its call. It says finch, but I think they meant flinch. Many a boy and girl not yet in their teens, many a man and woman at the time of brightest promise, many of the aged have gone alone to a distant province, and among strangers have become of them, body, brain, and spirit. But even among beautiful surroundings, if duty lies behind, undone, nothing while life lasts can break the heart pool, the brain planning, the soul prayer to the reach, even partially the lost goal. Such is the deep hidden soul of Japan. When the young princess bade farewell to my grandmother, she presented her as the highest token of grateful and affectionate appreciation, something which she herself had worn, a dress bearing her own crest. Many years afterward, for the Bon Festival when I was 10 years old, excuse me. When I was 10 years old, my grandmother sent this choice treasure to me. I well remember that day. Ishi had taken me to my room to dress for the evening of our welcome. Hanging over one of the large lacquer frames on which we spread our clothing to air or to wait until we were ready, was a beautiful summer dress of pale blue linen, decorated with an exquisite design of the 7 grasses of autumn. It seemed to me the most beautiful thing that I had ever seen in my life. "Oh, Ishi," I cried, "is this beautiful dress for me?" "Yes, Etsuko-sama. Honorable Yedo grandmother has sent it to you for the festival." "Eli, hi, welcome." We're in the middle of reading A Daughter of the Samurai. It's an autobiographical story of a late 1800s Japanese girl who ended up moving to Ohio. So pretty cool. She's still in Japan though in the book, so no weird Ohio moments quite yet. It was too large for me, and Toshi had to take back tucks at the shoulders and waist. When I dressed, I went to show myself to honorable grandmother and mother. Then I went to father's room. "I have come," I announced, kneeling outside the closed door, ready to open it. "Enter," came the response from within. I pushed back the shoji. Father was reading. He looked up with a smile. Then, what was to my surprise to him, after one glance at me, quickly slipped from his cushion and with slow dignity dramatically announced, "Enter the Princess of Satsuma." Then he made a deep bow. Of course, my own little head was down to the floor in an instant, and though when I lifted it, he was laughing, still I felt in some subtle way that there was something deeper beneath his smile than just his humor, obeisance to the crest of a superior clan. A combined pride and grief, and perhaps pain also, like the cruel ache in the heart of a strong man whose sword arm is helpless. Dang, I was gonna do one more chapter, but it's super long. Well, we'll keep going for a little bit. Chapter 10, The Day of the Bird. However, I might need to get some more tea. I'm pretty much at the dregs of my tea, and I don't know how much longer I can read with only snippets of tea left. I forgot I left my kettle going. I'm gonna grab some more tea really quick. I'll be back in so soon, but here, play the little word game while I'm gone. Gonna be honest with you, I couldn't. I was waiting to see if you were gonna guess another word. I couldn't guess. I couldn't tell what the hell else you could. What could possibly start blank DEER? What else would it be? I'm sorry, I can leave again. I can leave again if I'm unwanted here. Steer. I know that was all I could think too, or like a deer? I don't know. I don't know. I can't think of a single word that could have possibly been. I'm puzzled. W deer? I don't think that's right. I don't think that's gonna be correct. Cast, baby. You can't lay on the keyboard. W deer. Oh shit, Cass is trying to lay on the keyboard. He discovered the cat pastime of walking on keyboards just today, and has been doing it the entire day, including while I was working. All day today. So, thank you, Cassidy. You're a bad boy. I'm just kidding. He's a very good boy. He's just a cat. He doesn't know anything. I'm really puzzled, though. I want to know what the answer was. What else could possibly be the answer? Fadir. Gadir. Bidir. Nidir. Midir. There's no possible answer for that. There's no possible answer for that. I don't know. I don't know. I'll let you ponder that, though. Why are you the same color as me? It's so confusing. You're chartreuse. You're a chartreuse clown. But to be honest, I always get confused when you and Jess come in because you have the same pink color. So, I mean, now I'll just be confused whether it's me or you. Alright. Are you ready to go on? Yes, chapter 10, The Day of the Bird. I have new tea. We can do another chapter. Excuse me, Cassidy. So I'm gonna move your tail, little boy. Thank you. Brother had been home a year when the letters from his friends in America began coming more frequently. Wow, I need to start the sentence over. Brother had been at home a year when the letters from his friend in America began coming more frequently. After each one, grandmother, brother, and mother would have long talks, and not all of them were happy ones. In a vague way, I sometimes thought these discussions had something to do with me, and one day was a little troubled when a long conference ended by brother's abruptly coming out of his room with only a short bow that was almost rude. He started swiftly toward the door, then turning, came back and stood by my side, looking steadily at me for a moment, but he went on without saying a word. Several weeks later, a thick, heavy letter came, one with many stamps, and after another talk in grandmother's room, brother sent Gia out with a long lacquer box tied with a cord, which I knew held a rounding letter, for all the relatives. Gia would wait at each place for it to be read before carrying it to the next place. That afternoon, I noticed mother was very thoughtful and quiet, and grandmother sat by her firebox, silent and stern, with her long, slender pipe in her hand. The tiny bowl held only 3 puffs, and after refilling it twice, she always put it away, but she seemed to have forgotten it that day and sat holding it a long time. The next day, there was a meeting at the family council. It has always been a Japanese custom to decide important family problems by calling an assembly of the older relatives. There had been a family council ever since I could remember, but being the youngest of the family and a girl, I was not concerned in them, and I never gave more than a passing thought as to whether this time it would mean the selling of another piece of land or one of our roll pictures. We had been selling things all my life. Sister and I were so accustomed to seeing the second-hand man go to the big plaster storehouse with old Gia that we made a practice of playing a guessing game as to whether he would come out with a small package in his hand or a big bundle on his shoulders. Mother used to look troubled when a group of men came to look at things, but father would laugh and say, "Useless beauty had a place in the old life, but the new asks only for ugly usefulness." But one thing father never laughed about. Whenever negotiations were pending in regard to land, he was always watchful. The outside limits of our once large estate had gradually been withdrawn within the walls, and year by year they were closing in nearer to the house. But father would never part with any portion of the garden overlooked by grandmother's room. After his death, brother was equally considerate. So long as she lived, grandmother could gaze out upon the garden, the stream, and the little slope of azaleas against the background of feathery bamboo, just as she had done for years. The family council was the largest that had been held since father's death. 2 gray-haired uncles were there with the aunts, besides 2 other aunts and a young uncle who had come all the way from Tokyo on purpose for this meeting. They had been in the room a long time, and I was busy writing at my desk when I heard a soft, "Allow me to speak," behind me, and there was Toshi at the door, looking rather excited. "Little mistress," she said with an unusually deep bow, "your honorable mother asks you to go to the room where the guests are." I entered the big room. Brother was sitting by the tokonoma, and next to him were 2 gray-haired uncles and the young uncle from Tokyo. Opposite sat honorable grandmother, the 4 aunts, and mother. Tea had been served, and all had cups before them or in their hands. As I pushed back the door, they looked up and gazed at me as if they had never seen me before. I was a little startled, but of course I made a low, ceremonious bow. Mother motioned to me, and I slipped over beside her on the mat. "Etsuko," Mother said very gently, "the gods have been kind to you, and your destiny as a bride has been decided. Your honorable brother and your venerable kindred have given much thought to your future. It is proper that you should express your gratitude to the honorable all." I made a long, low bow, touching my forehead to the floor. Then I went out and returned to my desk and my writing. I had no thought of asking, "Who is it?" I did not think of my engagement as a personal matter at all. It was a family affair. Like every Japanese girl, I had known from babyhood that sometimes, as a matter of course, I should marry, and that was a faraway necessity to be considered when the time came. I did not look forward to it. I did not dread it. I did not think of it at all. I did not think of it at all. The fact that I was not quite 13 had nothing to do with it. That was the attitude of all girls. The formal ceremony of the betrothal took place some months later. It was not an elaborate affair, like a wedding, but was very important, for in old-fashioned families, the betrothal was considered as sacred as the marriage itself, and indeed it could not be nearly as easily broken as might the marriage tie. There was an air of quiet excitement in the whole house that day. The servants, who always felt a personal interest in everything that happened in the family, had hung weathered dolls of folded paper on the nanten bushes near the front porch to ensure sunshine, and were jubilant over the result. And even Mother, who always seemed more calm when she was excited, went around giving unnecessary directions to various maids. "Be careful in powdering Etsuko-sama's face," I heard her say to Ishii. "Get the paint smooth." And when the hairdresser arrived, Mother made a second trip to the room to give a special order that Etsuko-sama's hair must be pulled straight. Why are those flesh-colored? What are they, in fact? They look like Kirby's. They look like little flesh-colored Kirby's. Actually kind of look like Buckeye cookies. As soon as I was dressed, I went to grandmother's room for the morning greetings. Her kindly smile was more gentle than usual, and we had a pleasant talk before breakfast was announced. As we were leaving the room, she reminded me that it was the day of the bird. "Yes, I know," I said. "A betrothal ceremony always takes place on the day of the bird. Honorable grandmother, why is that?" "Be not ambitious to be vain," she said, smiling and resting her arm on my shoulder as we walked down the porch. "This day was chosen by your relatives with the kind wish that good fortune will bless your life with silks and brocades and plentiful as are the feathers of the birds." Matsuo's aged uncle, Mr. Omori. Mr. Omori? It really says Mr. Omori in here. Matsuo's aged uncle, Mr. Omori, had arrived from Kyoto a few days before and had been entertained at the home of the go-between. The ceremony had to take place in the waxing rather than the waning of the day, so about the middle of the forenoon, when I went to the best room, I found the others already assembled. Matsuo's uncle was seated on a cushion near the tokonoma. He sat very straight and had a pleasant face. I liked him. Grandmother, brother, mother, and the 2 go-betweens were there, and I sat beside Mother. The woman go-between brought me to a small white table with a square of crepe over it, on which was Matsuo's crest. It was the engagement gift from his family, and I was looking for the first time upon the crest that I should have to wear all my life. But I did not seriously realize it. Another tray held other gifts, the most important of which was a pair of folding fans, signifying a wish for constantly widening happiness. Then Toshi brought into the room 2 trays and set them before Mr. Omori. It was my family's gift to Matsuo. Of course, I had been told exactly what to do, so I lifted the square of the crepe from my table, displaying a roll of magnificent brocade for a sash. On Mr. Omori's tables were the essential pair of fans and a wide pleated silk skirt called hakama, the regulation dress for a Japanese gentleman. These have been the betrothal gifts from time immemorial. I bowed most formal thanks, and Mr. Omori did the same. Then the gifts were placed on the tokonoma, and everybody, even grandmother, made a slight bow and murmured, "Congratulations." Soon after, the maids brought small tables for our dinner, placing those for the gentlemen on one side of the room and those for the ladies on the other. Then Toshi, with her tray, took her place in the open space at the end of the 2 lines. Each person made a slight bow, and the dinner commenced. The conversation was general, and the guests seemed to have a pleasant time, but of course I was very quiet and dignified. The most interesting part of the day to me came after everyone had gone, and Ishii was taking off my dress. She eyed my head very closely. Ma, Etsubo-sama, she said. It was such luck that today was cold and dry. Your hair has not one bit of a crinkle. For once, my unruly hair had not disgraced my family, and giving a sigh of relief, I placed my head carefully upon my little wooden pillow and went contentedly to sleep. After my betrothal, my life was a sort of make-believe game, for my education as a wife began that very day. I had already received the usual training in cooking, sewing, and various household duties, as well as flower arranging, tea serving, and other womanly accomplishments. But now I had to put these things into practice as if I were already in my husband's home. I was expected to select without assistance the proper flowers, the suitable roll picture and tokonoma ornament, and see that the house was always arranged according to certain established rules. Every moment my life was filled with training and preparation. The object was not explained to me, for this education was a taken-for-granted part of every betrothal, and it happened in my case that no special explanation was necessary, other than that I had to be careful not to be in any way disrespectful to wood sorrel, since Matsuo's crest was conventionalized wood sorrel. Except that I had to learn to like tuna, which was a favorite dish of Matsuo's, and which I had never cared for. My diet was not affected at all by my betrothal. Sister had a long training, for she had been betrothed 5 years, including the year of postponement on account for father's death. As her expected husband's crest was conventionalized plum, she never during the 5 years tasted plum even in jelly. It would have been disrespectful. The hardest thing I did that year was to learn how to make a sleeping cushion. I loved to sew and was rather skillful with the needle, but I had never made anything myself. Ishii and Toshi had always helped me, but every Japanese housewife had to know how to make cushions, for they were our chairs and our beds. So mother said that I must make a sleeping cushion entirely alone. This was a difficult thing for anyone to do, and my sleeves were wet with foolish tears when for the 4th time I pulled out the threads and turned the immense cushion inside out in order to refit the corners, which, in spite of my persistent efforts, would stay twisted. I very well know that feeling, as someone who can sew. Though I never sewed anything entirely by hand, which I'm sure she's doing and not using a sewing machine, so it sounds way worse. Another of my duties was the preparation on anniversaries and at festival times of a shadow table for my absent fiancé. On these days, I myself cooked the food which brother told us Matsuo especially liked. His table was placed next to mine, and I arranged for it to always serve before my own. Thus I learned to be watchful for the comfort of my prospective husband. Grandmother and mother always spoke as if Matsuo were present, and I was as careful of my dress and conduct as if he had really been in the room. Thus, I grew to respect him and to respect my own position as his wife. I know what the answer is to this question, and I don't like it because I'm looking at this from a 2024 point of view, but it just seems so much that she's going through all this to prepare for being married, but is this dude even thinking of her at all? Like, is he thinking like, oh, when I have a wife, I'll have to worry about this and that? I freaking doubt it. I doubt it. Another of my duties was... I just said all that stuff. Most of the memories of that time are like faint heartthrob phantoms now, but one always stands out clear and strong. That has to do with a birthday. Japanese people do not, as a rule, observe individual birthdays. Instead, it is the custom to celebrate New Year as a birthday for each person of the nation. This gives a double meaning to the day and makes New Year the most joyous celebrated of any festival of the year. But in our house, one especial birthday was always honored. That was Matsuo's. This was not on my account. From the time Mother had learned of his kindness to Brother, never did a January 8th pass that we did not have an elaborate dinner, with a table for Matsuo and the place of honor as our guest. Mother always kept up this custom, and in later years, when, in a far distant land, I have thought with a mist in my eye of the birthday table in my mother's home in the mountains of Japan. During these months, Mother and I came closer to each other than we had ever been before. She did not confide in me, that was not Mother's way, but it seemed that an invisible cord of sympathy was drawing our hearts together. I had always greatly admired my mother, but there was little awe mixed with my admiration. Father had been my comrade and my friend as well as my wise advisor, and my whole heart was filled with tender love for my dear, patient, unselfish Ishi. But Mother was aloft like the sun, flawless and steady, filling the home with life-giving warmth, yet too far away to be treated familiarly. So I was surprised one day when she came quietly to my room and told me there was something she wanted to speak to me about before she told grandmother. Our house had received word from the go-between that Matsuo had removed to a city in the eastern part of America and had gone for business for himself. On this account, he had decided not to return to Japan for several years and asked that I be sent to him there. Hang tight one sec. I just realized that I have May hair. Is it still how I saw it recently? Because, yeah, you're right. You definitely do. That's funny. It's exactly like May's hair. Mother always accepted inevitable circumstances with calm resignation, but this was a very unusual and puzzling situation. For generations, Japanese mothers, believing that the destined home for every girl is settled by the gods, have sent their daughters as brides to distant provinces. So my going to America was not a matter of deep concern. But for a bride to go into a home where there was neither mother-in-law nor an elder sister of wisdomage to train her in the ways of the new household was a serious problem. And this was not a case that could be referred to by the family council, for I was much bound to Matsuo as if I were already married, and the affairs of the Inagaki family had no authority. In this strange situation, Mother turned to me, and for the first time in my life, I was consulted in a family matter. I think I changed from girl to woman in that hour of conversation with my mother. We decided that, at least for the present, there was but one problem for us to face. That was how to prepare for the unknown life in a strange land. In this, my relatives could take no part. Of course, all were excited and each one volunteered advice, but the only practical suggestion came from Brother. He said I must have an English education. That meant that I should have to be sent to school in Tokyo. All that winter, the household was busy getting me ready for school. The pathos of these preparations I did not realize, nor, I think, did any of us. Mother spent evening after evening bending her stately head over a wonderful embroidered garment, ripping out stitch by stitch the exquisite work of hands folded in rest generations ago. Then Ishii would dye the silk and make it into plain garments suitable for my school life. And many things were sold. Grandmother and Mother consented to any sacrifice, though sometimes their faces were sad, but Brothers seemed to have lost all feeling for the precious old belongings, and would part with them without one expression of regret. Treasures are a useless care, he often said. In a poor house like ours, there is no need to keep dozens of chests of retainers' armor. They had their place in the past, but hereafter the sons of our ancestors must fight on the battlefield of commerce. Business is the key to wealth, and in the new world, wealth is the only power. I thought little of it then, but now it aches me to remember the sword-hilt ornaments of exquisite workmanship in gold and silver and bronze that were sold for almost nothing. And I can see even now how the great scales of the dealer in old iron tipped heavily with the weight of the swords that once were the pride of our humblest retainers. One cold evening I went into grandmother's room and snuggled down beside her cushion, close to the firebox, just as I used to in the days which were beginning to seem to me so far in the past. We had grown somewhat apart that year. I was no longer the little child she could make happy with sweets, could train in politeness and teach useful lessons by means of fairy lore. And I felt that, much as she loved me, The new conditions that my future faced were beyond her old-fashioned comprehension. But I learned that night, while I talked with her, that samurai training will prepare one for any future. As we sat in the quiet room, lighted only by the soft glow of the charcoal fire, she told me how that very day, 60 years before, she, as a bride, had left her home in a distant province to come to her husband in Nagaoka. Most brides of her rank revisited their homes each year in a long procession of grandeur, but though messengers were sent with inquiries and gifts every New Year and summer festival season, grandmother never, after she entered the marriage palanquin, saw her home or her people again. In those days of slow travel, distance was counted by time rather than miles, and hers was a long trip. She left home on the night of the full moon, and another full moon was in the sky when she was carried through the entrance gate of her husband's home. I was just your age, 14, she said, and sometimes as the procession passed through the strange provinces, climbing over mountains and crossing wide rivers, I wondered many things. It was farther than Kyoto that I came, and at the gateway of each province there were long waits while the officials of the processions exchanged papers and received permission for us to pass. At these times, my nurse always came and remained beside my palanquin, and the spare retainers and six shoulders of coolie carriers were with us, so I did not fear. But the world seemed very strange and large to me, and the people I came to live among were very different than my own. The customs were new, even the language had an accent and idioms that seemed peculiar. It was like a foreign land, and so, of late, I have thought much of you and the unknown country to which your fate is taking you. Remember, Etsuko, and her voice was strangely tender, where you live is a small matter. The life of a samurai, man or woman, is just the same. Loyalty to the overlord, bravery in defense of his honor. In your distant, destined home, remember grandmother's words. Loyalty to your husband, bravery in defense of his honor. It will bring you peace. And that is the end of chapter 10. I think we'll call it off there. I think that's a good stopping place for the evening. It sounds like she's gonna start getting ready for her wedding after this. So we'll pick back up next time. The next chapter is called My First Journey. I hope you guys are all cozy and relaxed and ready for bed. I know if you're on the West Coast like me, it might still be a little bit early for sleepy times yet, but yeah, hope you're all snuggled in, comforted. We'll probably do another reading stream next weekend. Haven't posted my schedule for the week yet, but it is Sunday, so you know what that means. We're gonna post it tonight, probably right after I get off here. For now, I'll see you guys next time. We're gonna raid, let's raid Slider Rye. Love that guy. We're gonna give him a little raid. You don't have to stick around, but he's playing Minecraft right now. He's pretty chill. He's a fun little community. He streams every single day, so he's a fun guy to follow. Recommended. Go on over, say hello. No pressure to stay though, like I said, but I hope each and every one of you have a lovely rest of your night and you feel happy, full of tea, and calm with good vibes. Take care.